Everyone, how's it going? We'll get started in a few minutes. I'm just gonna let everyone in. Okay, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Okay, everyone, let's get started. Yeah, I think today, let me just look at the schedule. I believe we're just gonna go through reading on a practice test, so I'm just gonna take that out. Yeah, so today's SHSAT reading review. We're gonna do the DOE SHSAT released exam form B. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let me just take that out. There we go. Let me share my screen. And also, if you can, it'd be nice if everyone could turn on their cameras, just so we all, like stay active on the meeting. Okay, here's the test. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to walk through as much as I can. Before I start, does anyone have any general questions on the reading and grammar? We'll start off with those. And if you guys don't have any specific question, I'm just gonna go through the test as quickly as I can. And I'm also going to highlight the topic as I go through. So we'll do a bit of both. So the TEI, we're gonna resume on the weekend. For the weekday sessions, we're just doing regular reading and math review. So yeah, that's the idea. Again, the schedule for this one, I'm gonna send I believe if you check your emails for the actual meet, today is we're just going through grammar and reading. Someone said, can you go over all the grammar and reading because that's where most people struggle? Yeah, that's great. I'm just going to do a full test review. Again, it's not like this is not important. The review that I'm going to do is very important for just knowing the content. For the TEI, again, we're going to have the session on the weekend, and we're going to go through those questions again. I'm pretty sure anyone who joined my weekend section probably has a good idea of how TEI works. I know the questions are not 100% accurate. There's a lot of mistakes in them, but I think everyone who joined my session is probably pretty confident on it now. Just because it's only those types of questions that are going to be asked. So yeah, let's go through let's go through question by question for this, okay? Yeah, someone say, did you record the TI meeting? Yeah, I did. If you'd like the recording, I believe you can ask Ben for it. So, yeah, let's go through this one. I'm kind of just going to do my own review as I go through question by question. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask as I go through, okay? Let's start with one. What pair of revisions need to be made in this paragraph? Okay. So what I look at, many people wonder what is the difference between the two. Delete the colon after wonder and change is to are. What are the difference? Okay, this is wrong because what are the difference? It's not grammatically correct. I want you to think to yourself why it's not. Are the difference? If it's are, that's plural. So it should not be are the difference, it should be are the differences. What are the differences between these two things? Right? When we say are, we're talking about plural. So since this is are the difference, this is not correct. Let's do the next one. To start with, the butterfat content is much higher in ice cream than it is in gelato. Delete the comma after with and change it is to they are. The butterfat content is much higher in ice cream than they are in gelato. That's wrong because the subject is the butterfat content. Butterfat content is a singular word. Content. It's a singular content. If it was plural, it would be butterfat contents. So since it's content, we're using singular words like is or yeah, is the main one. So for B, we want to use singular words like is, and if you're going to change it to they are, that's already wrong. Why would we make it plural? C, delete the comma after process. Additionally, the mixing process. Oh yeah, okay, so this is wrong because you guys have to understand when there's a comma before and after a phrase, this phrase here we call, officially it's called a non-essential phrase. So I'm gonna write this down. Non-essential phrase. A non-essential phrase describes the subject but is not the main subject. So when we have a non-essential phrase like this, which adds less air to the frozen treat, this is talking about the mixing process. We need the comma before and after the phrase, just so that we have an appropriate pause. If we're deleting the comma after process, we're deleting this phrase, and it's not going to make sense grammatically. So we need the comma before and after this phrase specifically so that it can correctly describe the mixing process. So the correct answer should just be D. Delete the comma after gelato and change allow to allows. Finally, gelato is served 10 to 15 times, 10 to 15 degrees warmer than ice cream, which enhances the texture and flavor of the gelato. So these are two things that are happening. It's enhancing the flavor and allowing it to melt more quickly. So we don't need a comma. We don't need a comma if they're describing two things about it. Here, they're talking about how it enhances and allows it. So those are two things about the ice cream. We don't need this comma. And since it's enhances, allow it does not make sense. We need an S. Allows it makes more grammatical sense here. So the answer should just be D. What's the thought process for these questions? I'm kind of just going through each answer choice and just eliminating it based on like whether or not it makes sense grammatically. The first two I'm able to eliminate because subject-verb agreement is wrong. The first one, are the difference, does not make sense. It should be are the differences. The second one, the singular word is, should be the main subject because it's butterfat content. Butterfat content is the subject here. So, and that's a singular word. And for C, we deleted that because it got rid of the phrase here. When we have a non-essential phrase like this that describes the mixing process, we need a comma before and after it because this is not the main subject. The main subject in sentence 3 is the mixing process makes gelato denser than ice cream. That's the main subject. This phrase before and after the comma tells me about the mixing process. It's not essential, but it tells me like a small detail about it. Someone asked, were we supposed to already do the test? Not really. Like I'm just kind of gonna go through each one. Okay, let's go to. Okay, someone said, can you explain that? Which verbs? Can you be more specific? Like what verbs do you mean? In the meantime, let's go through the second one, and then I'll answer your question. But yeah, one is D. Two, what's the best way to combine these sentences? Oh, I remember doing this question as I practiced for 2 years ago. Okay. Scientists now believe that Jupiter has many as 79 moons. One of Jupiter's moons is named Io. So again, first, the subject here is Jupiter. The detail is as many as 79 moons. One of the moons is named Io. And then it tells me another, so the subject of the second sentence is Io, and the third sentence also has the same subject. One of Jupiter's moons is named Io. Actually, I guess the subject could be like Jupiter's here because it's telling us Jupiter's moon is Io, and then this just tells us a detail about Io. Okay, so let's kind of just go through each one. E is wrong because why do we have to? We talk about moons twice, which is kind of like it's kind of crazy because it's just repetitive. The first idea should be that Jupiter has 79 moons. One of those moons is named Io, and then Io has the greatest number of active volcanoes. Does everyone understand that thought process? So we should start with one, lead into two, and then lead into three. Scientists believe Jupiter has 79 moons. One of the moons are Io, and Io has the greatest, right? Okay, let's go to the next one. Scientists now believe that Jupiter has many as 79 moons. One of them is named Io, which has the greatest number of active volcanoes in the solar system. So the problem here is that the word and is not exactly correct because the moon is named Io, right? When I say that Jupiter has 79 moons, we want to include those Io as one of those moons. So instead of saying and, we would say Jupiter has as many as 79 moons, including one of them named Io. Here it sounds like it's just another detail, and one of them is named Io. But we want to clarify I don't know who that was. We want to clarify specifically that Io is included in one of those 79 moons. I know that it says one of them is named Io, but that's not enough. We should use a more active word, including, right? When we say and, it sounds like it's just an example of one of Jupiter's moons. The main subject here is how it should be including. So this leads me into G. G is the same as F, except it says including one named Io. This is more specifically telling us the relationship between these two sentences because it includes Io as one of the 79 moons. So I'm inclined to choose G as our correct answer. Then, H is wrong for the same reason as E. Jupiter's moon, 79 moons, those are repeated twice. We don't need it to be repeated twice. So we can rule those out. Okay, let's go to the next one. 3. Error in its construction and should be revised. The blobfish is an unusual fish whose body is mostly composed of pink gelatinous flesh. That seems correct. Because it has very few muscles and its density is close to that of water, the blobfish spends its life floating slightly above the ocean floor. Correct. It must wait patiently for whatever edible matter might flow through its mouth. Edible matter is it's like a noun. Edible means like what they can eat, like something that they can eat. So it must wait patiently. It is talking about the blobfish. It seems like they want to refer to the blobfish with it. That's totally fine. It must wait patiently for whatever edible matter might float by its mouth. I think this is correct. Let's look into why D is incorrect. The blobfish's downturned mouth, slimy skin, and pale coloring caused them. The whole time in the passage, we're using it to describe a blobfish. Blobfish is a singular thing. Them sounds like it's a group of them, but there's no group mentioned here, so it's not. It should not be them. The correct replacement could be it. Caused it to be voted the world's ugliest animal. Yeah, so it should just be D. Okay, does anyone have any questions on this? Someone said, but the blobfish species has many of them. I agree with you, but it says the blobfishes here. Again, one reminder for you guys, when we have an apostrophe followed by an S, this is possessive. This means that possessive means that the blobfish has whatever is after this. So the blobfish has a downturned mouth, slimy skin, pale coloring. Does that make sense? So in this case, it's possessive. So they're not referring to the species, they're referring to a singular blobfish. So that's why it's not them, it should be it. And we see in the rest of the sentences it's talking about it like because it has few muscles, it must wait patiently, so it should just be it. Okay, let's go to the next one. What sentence contains an error in its construction and should be revised? So again, I'm just going to go through sentence by sentence. In 1976, the NBA absorbed several teams of the ABA, including the Nets, who played in Long Island area at the time. There's a lot going on here, but there's no error in its construction here. This main subject is NBA absorbed several teams of the ABA, and then it gives us an example, including the Nets, who last played in Long Island. The owner of the Nets decided to take the team to New Jersey after the team had financial troubles, where the team played for 35 seasons. Okay, the obvious error here is that the subject seems to be repeated, or not the subject, one of the subjects seems to be repeated multiple times. That's an error in its construction because we don't want to repeat our subject twice or 3 times. Here it says they want to take the team to New Jersey after the team had financial troubles, where the team played for 35 seasons. We don't need to repeat team 3 times. That seems like a pretty big error to me. So we'll choose F. Let's go through the rest first before we decide. The New Jersey Nets had 16 playoff appearances, including 2 appearances in the NBA Finals. In 2012, the team changed its ownership and returned to New York, where the team now plays under the name the Brooklyn Nets. Yeah, this makes sense. Both sentences that come after make sense logically, so we're just going to choose F. Is it also because the where part does not refer to financial trouble? Yes, that's also another reason why. So We see here where the team played for 35 seasons. It sounds like they're elaborating on the financial troubles, but that doesn't make sense logically. I think the clarification here as well should be that when it says where the team played for 35 seasons, it's not talking about the financial troubles. It's talking about New Jersey. The team played in New Jersey for 35 seasons. So this clause should be next to New Jersey. So I guess there's two errors actually. One is that the team is repeated 3 times. The other one is that this clause here is not connected to New Jersey. It seems like the financial troubles caused them to play for 35 seasons, but that doesn't make sense, right? So yeah, the answer should just be F. Okay, let's go to the next one. I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to read through this. I'll read through it as well. Again, for these I mean, my strategy is I would not focus too much on the content. You kind of just want to skim and see where all the information is. And then when you answer the questions, it'll tell you exactly where to look back. Because this is grammar passage. So, okay, let's take like 2 minutes to do it. Someone said, can you send the link for this test? Sure, I'm going to drop it in the chat. Okay, I dropped it. Okay, I finished reading. If you didn't, it's totally fine. Again, the idea here is you don't want to focus too much on understanding what's going on. Just skim through and understand where each thing is going on. So when I read this, I am seeing like the first paragraph is talking about Alps and the roads and railways, how to navigate through this. Second paragraph is talking about the construction of like a high speed railway tunnel and how this is like there's like a lot going on here in terms of like the construction and actually creating it. And then this tells us more specifically how the travel times are being cut and how it's helping. And then the last paragraph kind of talks about how people are still interested in continuing to like make new innovative ways. So yeah. Someone said, are there going to be poems on the test? Probably one. I mean, like I had one on mine, I remember, so I would definitely like prepare for one. Okay, let's go to the first. Let's just walk through this, and then we'll kind of. I think we might have time for all the reading. If not, we'll focus on like the harder ones first, and then, um, yeah, because I know someone just asked me to go through poetry. Someone else asked, should I go to the questions and then read the text? No, I mean, I'm not a big fan of that. If that works for you, that's fine. I would not suggest that because sometimes the content is so complex that you won't understand what's going on at all. So you'll be confused. I like to I like to skim through the passage, read the questions, and then go back and just like figure it out. Um, Someone said, are they going to use old passages or newer passages? For sure, newer passages. Again, newer passages doesn't mean the passage all came out in 2025, but they're going to come up with new passages that you have not practiced with. That could be from like 1950s, that could be from like modern day. We don't know, but it's going to be new content for sure. Okay. Which sentence should be added after sentence 5 to introduce the main topic? The main topic of this passage. So after sentence 5. Sentence 5 says, these burdens were eased with the completion of the Gotthard base tunnel. So it seems like they just want to expand on what the tunnel is. So we want to find out what grammatically makes the most sense. I see all the answer choices talk about the Gotthard tunnel. The construction was approved by Swiss voters in 1992 and funded by tolls, fuel taxes, and government loans. I mean, this tells us about like the funding, but it doesn't really describe what the tunnel is. So we're gonna mark that off. B is completely wrong. It tells us that leaders came to see the Gotthard base tunnel. Again, it doesn't describe what the tunnel is, so this is wrong. C does a better job describing what the tunnel is. World's longest and deep running railway tunnel, and it stretches 35.5 miles straight. So it's pretty good. And then this tells us a consequence as to why they built the tunnel, but the question is not asking us for this, so we can rule this out. So the correct answer here should just be C. Someone said, do you remember if your test was easier than the practice test? It was, honestly, I'll be honest, like my test was not easy. Like, especially the poem was not easy. Not to scare you guys, but I think like you guys should be mentally prepared to answer like difficult passages and difficult questions on your test. I'd say my test was like a medium level difficulty. Like that. I remember the poem being especially hard, but the rest of them were like okay for me. So yeah, again, just mentally prepare yourself for that. And someone said, was the math hard? I to be honest, I never struggled too much with math because it would be like it was like my best topic, so I didn't think it was too bad. Yeah. So okay, and the answer is C. Again, C is the most specific, and C actually talks about the tunnel. Why do I know we have to talk about the tunnel? After sentence five literally leads up to it. It was eased with the completion of the tunnel. Logically, after they say this, you would describe what the tunnel is, right? Because these tunnels ease the burden. So you say something like the Gotthard base tunnel was made in this year and it helped people do this, whatever. That's the idea that I had. So that's why the answer is going to be C. Okay, let's do the next one. Which sentence should be added to follow and support sentence 7? Sentence 7 says the tunnel was created through the use of tunnel boring machines, which are giant drills with a flat rotating head called a cutter head. It seems like they want to talk more about the construction of this. Let me look at the answer choices just so that I can see. Okay, this is fine. This is E is fine, but it's wrong because it says it has been. Well, I can't even see that. Wait, let me move this. Okay, it says it has been an improvement over dynamite. This is irrelevant, right? They don't really want to talk about this. They want to talk about this machine in terms of like how it was used to create this tunnel. And this doesn't. This is just an irrelevant detail. F tells us how the machines work. It says function somewhat like a cheese grater, and it tells us that it grinds slowly through rock and stone. This is good. G says engineers had considered making a tunnel under the mountains for many years, but it's impossible to do with modern tunnel boring machines. I think the problem here is that we're trying to follow and support sentence 7. Most importantly, support. This is a good idea. This is pretty creative idea to add, but it's not supporting the sentence 7. Sentence 7 is telling us how they use these machines to create the tunnels. So what follows and supports it? Something that tells me how the tunnels boring machines work. So that's why G is going to be wrong. And then the last one, different types of cutter. Like this is just not telling us how the machines work. It's just saying how different cutter heads depend on the geology. This is not telling us any specifics on how it's working. So the answer should just be F. Okay, does that make sense to anyone? Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay. Again, the main idea, when it says follow and support sentence 7, you are only focusing on that sentence. Sentence 7 is telling us that they use these machines and it was called, okay, how do I know we have to talk about the machine? They literally talk about the flat rotating head. if they talk about the flat rotating head, that's like a segue, or that's leading up into how like these cutter head worked, or how did the machine work to make the tunnels. Um, does that make sense? So, and we know that we have to talk about the machine because the next sentence is literally talking more about the machines. So it's kind of just like I already knew the idea was talking about the machine in more details. Okay, let's do 7. Where should sentence 11 be to improve the organization of the second paragraph? What is 11? Okay. Yeah, I already knew 11 was kind of out of place. Seemed like that at the start. So let's look at this. Okay. 4 million cubic meters of concrete, or enough concrete to support 84 Empire State Buildings, were used to construct and support the tunnel. And this phrase says after that. So it seems like some sort of thing happened when they made it, and then they talked about it. So let's go through. And this seems like it's talking about how this concrete was used to construct it somewhere in the process of making the tunnel. Um, so um, it's not 7 and 8. 8 says each of these machines was about the length of 4 football fields. It's not going to be after 8. 9 says during the 17-year construction period, 28 million tons of rock removed. Okay, so think about it logically. They removed the rock and then they put in the concrete to construct the tunnel. So it's going to be after this sentence 9. So 9 is telling us they removed the rock. 11 is telling us that they put concrete. 10 is giving us a summary. It's saying this construction, this thing that they did cost $12 billion. So yeah, the answer should just be in between 9 and 10. Is that an answer choice? Yeah, it should just be D then. Okay. Someone asked, when a sentence is out of place, is it not relevant to the paragraph or not relevant to the passage? So when it says it's out of place, it is relevant somewhere. It's going to make sense somewhere else. When it's irrelevant, it's going to be like in question 8, where it says it should be removed. Which sentence presents information that shifts away and should be removed? And then Chase said, I don't want to read those grammar passages. How do I find the main idea without reading the entire thing? So the idea is like each paragraph has like a main idea, and it's usually like the first sentence or so. Like I I know you don't like. I guess the idea is like you don't want to read through this entire thing and understand it. I get it because right, you don't have all the time in the world to take this test, but it's kind of like just reading the first sentence can give you a good idea. An age-old proverb says that necessity is the mother of invention, and it seems like here they're just talking about inventing stuff in the Swiss Alps and northern Italy. This talks about the construction of the actual tunnel. This tells us the actual things that the tunnel accomplished. It can carry more than 250 freight trains and trains a day, with most traveling at speeds of this. And then the next paragraph, just as congestion in major cities have sent people underground for fresher, easier transport and cheaper methods of transportation across larger areas. So from this first sentence, I can kind of get the idea that okay, they just want to talk about how in the future that these things will continue to happen, like people will continue to innovate. So one way to do this is just skimming through, and if that doesn't work for you, just read the first sentence to get like a good idea of what's going on. Yeah. 8, which sentence presents information that shifts away from the main topic. So just read 13, 14, 15, 16, and like just figure it out. Let's see. 13, it will be faster to people to travel between Northern and Southern Europe. This tells us something good about it. So this keeps travel time between the Zurich, Switzerland, Milan, Italy will be reduced by an hour. Yeah, we would still keep it because it still tells us how it like helped. 15, many of the European cities compare the Gotthard-based tunnel to the Channel Tunnel, a 33-mile underwater tunnel that connects the UK and France. Okay, is this relevant? Let's keep it for now. Let's see. And then 16 says, while there is no roadway um, in the Channel Tunnel, people can drive their cars onto special trains that will carry their vehicles through to the other side. So what is more, honestly, it would be between 15 and 16 in my idea. Um, and I think the comparison between the channel tunnel is probably more important than telling us this random detail about there's no roadway, but people can drive their cars on special trains. The reason why I think 15 is more important than 16 is because the whole idea here is like how this is just an improvement of transportation from one place to another. 16 tells us an irrelevant detail about it. 15 makes a comparison about how there was another tunnel that was being built for the same reason. So I'm just going to choose 15. I'm not. 15 should be kept, and then 16 should be your answer as to like what should be removed.
Um, okay, does anyone have any questions on that? What do you do when you're stuck in between two choices? Evaluate all the information you can. Um, yeah, I guess that's like the best thing you can do here. The answer is H for this one. Evaluate the best information that you can and then make an assumption. You don't have too much time on the test to like think about whether or not you want to choose an answer, so just do your best in evaluating. That's about all I can say. If you're stuck still between both, then that's like it's kind of tough, so I get it. Nine with transition phrase should be added to the beginning of sentence 18. Okay, let's go to sentence 18. So for this, it says you want to add a transition phrase to the start of 18. So you want to read the sentence before and then the sentence 18. So when I go to 18, I'm reading sentence 18, and I'm also reading the sentence before. So this sentence says, congestion leads to the construction of underground transformation. Natural formations such as mountain ranges have also sent people underground for faster, easier, and cheaper methods of transportation. There is renewed interest in constructing innovative methods of transportation that'll help eliminate problems associated with traveling to and from certain areas. Let's go through all the answer choices. Mm, okay. Um, this is just irrelevant. Like you can tell nine is irrelevant, although it's mainly for freight trains. And the next sentence does not even talk about freight trains. It just says there's renewed interest in constructing innovative methods of transportation that'll eliminate problems associated with traveling to and from certain areas. This is not a good way to start because you're just mentioning an irrelevant detail about the base tunnel that isn't even important in the subject. So we're crossing this out. Um, B, with the Gothard-based tunnel taking 10 years to complete, again, it's like an irrelevant detail. It's not like the fact that it took 10 years to complete that they want to continue doing this, right? The idea is sentence 18 tells us that people want to continue building or innovating like different roads between places or different travels between places. So B is wrong. Because of the successful completion of the Gothard-based tunnel, okay, this is good because it's telling us because this tunnel was so good, we are going to continue to innovate and create more tunnels like this or more ways of transportation between places. So this is a good idea to have. Um, and then D is just wrong because D implies that if the number of trains using the tunnel increases, we have to make another Gothard-based tunnel because of that. And that's not true. We're not making another one because this one is getting too crowded. We're making another one because this one is so good and this helps so many people that we're going to continue making other ones in different places just so that people can travel. So the correct answer here should just be C. Um, Someone said, do I choose more specific or less specific for choosing between two? Um, Again, the idea, it really depends on the question. Like, you would want most questions you do want to be specific like as much as you can. Someone said, why not D? Again, I just want you to, I think I explained it, but I said it says the number of trains using the tunnel increases. This is not a valid reason for us to continue to innovate because this means that if more trains are using the Gothard-based tunnel, then we just have to create more tunnels like this to accommodate the people. That's not why we are creating it. We are creating new innovations of like tunnels and roadways between places because this one was so good and we saw the good benefits that it had. And the reason why C is correct because C tells us that because of the successful completion of the tunnel, going back to the sentence 18, There is renewed interest in constructing innovative methods of transportation. So this basically means if you like dumb it down and just understand it, it's basically telling you that because it was so good, because the tunnel was so good, people want to continue making new methods of transportation that eliminates problems. That's basically what's happening. And this is a logical conclusion, right? People want to continue making this because they saw how good the Gotthard tunnel is. So the answer is just where is it? It's just C. Okay, let's go to 10. What should be added after sentence 18 to support the topic presented in the passage? So sentence 18 was telling us how there is renewed interest. People have renewed interest in constructing transportation that'll eliminate problems associated with traveling to and from certain areas. So we want to go through with this idea. Um, there's proof that it's beneficial to the economy. Economy is not mentioned in this passage, so we can rule that out. Although it mentions briefly mentions how much it costs to create the tunnel, that is not the economy. It does not mention how it affected the economy. Um, F is a good wrap up because F talks about still the main subject is the base tunnel and how this is an extraordinary example of how human ingenuity and persistence overcomes great obstacles. So this is valid. This should be fine. Let's continue going through the rest though. Um, we want to support the topic presented in the passage. The topic is not that people can work together to achieve important goals. The topic of this passage is that this tunnel is a reminder of how we can create more tunnels like this that'll support people and be beneficial to like our lands and be beneficial if I'm going from one place to another place. So that's why G is wrong. G has this very happy ending, like people can work together to achieve important goals, but that's not what we're going for. That's not the topic of this passage. Topic of this passage is how the tunnel, like how this tunnel is an example of that. How this tunnel is an example of like how we can create more tunnels to like support people. H, the Swiss government is confident that the economic part impact of the Gotthard-based tunnel, again, there's no economic impact talked about, so it should just be F. Okay, does anyone have any other questions on the, okay, so that's the end of the grammar. Does anyone have any other questions on the grammar before I move on? Um, okay, let me clear it. Let's go to, okay, the world has an e-waste problem. Let's spend, okay, does anyone want to do a specific passage? I probably have time to do everything, but let's just, let's focus on like, the few important ones that are kind of like, okay, someone said this one, so we'll do this one, and then if there's a poetry one, let's see. Yeah, there's a poetry one, so we can do this one too. And then, oh, that's it. Wait, what? No, it's not. Okay. And then this is another reading one. Okay. So let's start with the first one and then we'll go to the poetry one and then we'll see where we are. We'll definitely have time to do most of these. So I'm just gonna spend some time reading this. Um, and then yeah, let's start with this. Oh, sorry about that. I meant this one. Okay, let's start with this one and then we'll go to the poetry one and then we'll try to work through. I know a lot of you guys want different things, but we just have to go according to like what most people want. So let's start with this one and then we'll continue. I'm just gonna read it right now. Um, Hmm. Okay, I think I finished it. My understanding of this, I guess, um, talking about 5G in the context of phones and then like how like people still want to innovate like they talk about this chief operating officer and how they still want to like innovate here, but it seems like the fact that they're switching to 5G and like technology is advancing, the cycle of consumption has made electronic waste the fastest growing solid waste stream. So one gives us context, two tells us in the words of like the co-founder, but it also tells us that we're contributing a lot to electronic waste. And it seems like 5G, although it's like a promise to like evolve like technology, but it increases e-waste. Someone else says, I don't think people understand the magnitude. Um, More details that support that it's bad for e-waste. Tells us about a problem. Regulatory means like states controlling um, what people are doing to their electronics. So it seems like they're not doing a good job of that. Only 19 states have laws banning it. Even when e-waste rules exist, it's left up to consumers to handle their own devices properly. And then it says like recycling is a problem for consumers because a lot of them are just like don't want to go through the expense. Simply they throw their device into trash or stash them in a drawer. And then here they mention like a solution. And then some environmental groups say these companies, so this is the solution here, and then this is like a call to action. Some people want these companies to be reliable to pick up the cost. Liable meaning like they want them to be responsible for recycling their devices that they sell. Yeah, and then the end. Okay. And oh, okay. So the okay. So yeah, I guess they give an image of how this works. Electronics, such as smartphones, contain toxins like lead, chromium, zinc, nickel, mercury, beryllium, cadmium. These substances are bioaccumulative, which means they accumulate over time in living. Oh wow. Okay. Interesting. So it seems like they just show like different places that could be affected. I guess that's what's happening here. Okay, let's go through. Twisted, doomed, unrelenting. What does that mean? Twisted movie, doomed gadgets, unrelenting conveyor belt. Into a machine that shreds them into pyres of copper, aluminum, and steel. Why do they use these words? To emphasize that discarded events are condemned to an unfortunate fate. This could be a good answer because it's emphasizing how like doomed the gadgets are doomed specifically. Unrelenting conveyor belt, that means it keeps going, and twisted is describing a movie. So it's like this is an unfortunate situation. These are words that are all telling us that the situation is unfortunate. So A could be a good answer. Desperation. I don't see any desperation here. It's bad. Desperation means like people feeling desperate, but here it's kind of like they accepted the doom. So it's not B. Implying that discarded devices are often disposed of in an appropriate manner. Well, this is true. This could be true, but that's not why the words are there. The words are there to emphasize how this is like a movie scene, and it's like they're all going to go to this really bad place. That's why they use these words. It's more to like emphasize the situation, not to show that it's inappropriate. I don't see anything here that tells us that it's inappropriate. We can also assume that this is inappropriate, but that is not why the author used these adjectives. So we see feeling of doubt. There's no feeling of doubt about solving the problem. I don't really feel any doubt here. It's kind of like people are just used to this. People are Like this discarded devices, that's just like their unfortunate fate. So I'd rule out D. Someone said the author is desperate and writes a whole argumentative passage to show that these gadgets are so new and should not be thrashed. Again, I agree with you. That's not what the question is asking, though. The question asks us, why are we using the words? We are using these words specifically to show that it's an unfortunate fate. These words do not add any other value to the passage. These words are used specifically to show how these gadgets are doomed, like they're condemned to an unfortunate fate. Unrelenting conveyor belt. They come in packages, one by one by one. They're all going to demise. That's why these words are used. So that's why the answer is A. Why isn't it C? Again, you have to focus on why these words are used. It could be true that the devices that are being discarded, someone thrown away, right? It could be because it's inappropriate manner, like they're doing this in a bad, like inappropriate way. But that's not why these words are used. Again, you guys have to focus on what is being asked in the question. The question asks us, why are we using these words? We are using these words to show that it sounds like it is hopeless for them. So, and someone says it And someone says the words convey a mood. Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, the words do convey a mood. Doomed and unrelenting literally relate to unfortunate. That's like a direct, like direct thing. So when someone said, "What does condemned mean?" It means like they're subject to. So they're condemned to. It's like they're subject to an unfortunate fate. Like they are going to have this unfortunate fate. And I think someone else said, it says how it affects the sentence, and it affects because it makes it sound desperate. It does not make it sound desperate. A sense of desperation means that they would try to relate to the readers, and they make the readers want to, like, save these gadgets. But it seems like when it says doomed and unrelenting, like, this is something that's just going to happen. It's an unfortunate fate. That's why these words are used specifically. So the answer should just be A. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one.
I'm
Just because
sorry
we
to
don't have
interrupt. My
time.
camera's not. Sorry to interrupt. My mic. My chat's not working. I had a question about how do you relate like the diagram to the um main idea.
Can you say it again? What do you mean?
So how do you like um relate how do you relate the picture that's like given to the main idea?
The picture here,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I'll figure it out I'll see when the question comes and I'll figure it out. But yeah, just wait until I get to that question. Yeah, let's go to 12. How does paragraph 2 build on what the reader learns in paragraph 1? Paragraph 1 talks about how we're a tech hungry nation. Um, and Okay. There's a lot of obsolete gadgets. Obsolete means we don't really use them anymore. Yeah, outdated, no longer useful. Um, and then it seems like these phones are subject to like this like discarding, and it's like an unfortunate scene. And then the second paragraph says, in our society, we have to have the new best product. Um, and we see that Americans spent a lot of money on new technology, but when we buy something new, we get rid of what's old, and this means electronic waste is the world's fastest growing solid waste stream. So, how does paragraph 2 relate to what we learned from paragraph 1? Paragraph 2 explains the underlying cause of the massive amounts of recycling that are being described in paragraph 1. This is true. The underlying cause is being explained in paragraph 2, right? How is it being explained? Just to go back one more time. um, we see that the underlying cause is that this cycle of consumption that they talk about. Because Americans are spending so much money. Now we know exactly. It says Americans are spending so much money on this new technology, nearly 5 times what they spent in 2010, that this is contributing to the cycle of consumption. So E is pretty good. Past trends that led to tech. No, it's not past. It's talking about present trends. So passage 2 cites statistics that supports the claim about technology that is stated. Like, this is okay. The problem here, support the claim about technology that is stated. This is just a very general thing. This could be maybe the distractor answer choice here. But it's not really like it needs to be more specific. That's why I wouldn't really choose G. And then H says expresses disapproval of the consumers who throw away the products. Okay, well, this could be true, but that's not what's happening in paragraph 2. We don't know exactly how the author feels. I don't see anything that says disapproval. It's just telling us facts right now. It's spitting facts to us, right? And it kind of leads up to the facts, but it never tells us that paragraph 2 expresses disapproval. It's just telling us the facts. So H is wrong and G is wrong. The answer should just be E. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, let's go to the next one. What sentence from the excerpt suggests that electronic devices are purposely designed to be disposed of after a short time? Okay, so this one we don't even need to go back. They're purposely designed to be disposed. This tells us what people do, but it doesn't tell us why they have to be disposed. Again, this tells us what people are doing to their devices, but it doesn't tell us how they are designed. There's something in their design that means that we have to throw it out. Um, Okay, this is good. This is telling us more specifically. Batteries cannot be replaced when they stop holding a charge. New laptops don't accept old cables. Software companies push upgrades that won't run on old devices. So these are telling us exact details why we have to replace, why these devices are being thrown out. It's telling us that because of their design, the way that they are designed, we have to throw them out. So it should just be seen. Yeah, then D just is irrelevant. Does anyone have any questions on this? See, someone said, is it true that the correct answer says something that was said in the passage and that's a hint? That is right. Can you be more specific? I think yes. I think what you're saying is correct, but I just don't understand it. Um, okay, let's go to the next one. Now, the details in paragraphs 4 to 5 develop a central idea, mainly by um, suggesting that, what is details in 4 and 5? Let's see. Less than a quarter of all US electronics is recycled. That's bad news. Because the rest is incinerated, ends up in landfills. This is pose environmental risks. Part of the problem is regulatory. So states are not doing their job. They're not doing their job and like um, banning electronics from regular trash. Environmental concerns aside, compacting flammable lithium-ion batteries with paper recycling can be dangerous. Recycling centers have reported an uptick in fires. So these are just telling us different consequences as to what's happening. How does this develop a central idea of the passage? Um, it's mainly suggesting that the toxic components make waste. No, because I don't see any reluctance. If waste collectors are reluctant, that means they don't want to do it. But they never said that in this passage, in these two paragraphs. Communities across the nation have taken different. No, this is not true. Communities across the nation have taken different approaches. It only tells us one specific approach made in Nevada. It doesn't tell us about anything else. So that's not a main idea. Increased amounts of e-waste will further intensify a problem that is already inadequately addressed. Okay, let's break this down. Increased amounts of e-waste intensifies a problem that we can't even solve. Increased amounts of e-waste means we throw out all our phones, right? Or all our old phones are being collected in like these two places, either like in um like the landfills or like we actually like recycle and replace them. And this is a problem that is already inadequately addressed. That's true because the fact that we have to put it in a landfill, this is inadequately addressed. There's problems to this. We see that people are dealing with like fires at these like facilities. It's mentioned more specifically in paragraph 5. So this could be the answer. The methods that are used for disposing of non-electronic waste are inefficient for e-waste. Good. I mean, like this one's kind of a trick. It says non-electronic waste. That's not mentioned in either paragraph. We're only talking about electronic waste here. So the answer should just be G. Does that make sense? Um, okay. Let's go to the next passage. I mean, next question, sorry. What's the roles of paragraph 7 and 9 in the organization of this excerpt? Um, mm, Tells us about a solution that could be possible. Um, And then, yet instead, technology companies are speeding the pace of obsolescence. Most smartphone bat, and then it tells us that the way that these companies design these technology is so that we can't reuse them. Like we have to throw them out eventually. Um, Yeah, some environmental groups say that companies should pick this up. Some companies are increasing their recycling efforts on their own, whether for economic benefit or public relations boost. Now let's go back to the question. The question is saying, what is the roles of the organization of the excerpt? What is the roles? They emphasize the contrast between successful and unsuccessful efforts to regulate electronic waste. Not really. There's no emphasis between what works and what doesn't. It's telling us, it's giving us suggestions on what people should do, but it never mentions anything about success. So, suggests whether the electronic devices that were manufactured creates less pollution. This is not relevant to what's even being said. That's not the present problem that we're dealing with. The past is not really anything that's irrelevant here. And they're not really comparing anything that was manufactured in the past that caused less pollution, so can rule this out. They imply that manufacturers are willing to comply with regulations. No, they never said anything like that. This is an idea that protesters want them to do, but the manufacturers never said that they would do it. Um, they shift the focus from a discussion of individual behavior to discussion of corporate responsibility. Yes, discussion of individual behaviors in the paragraphs before where they talk about like what people have been doing. Discussion of corporate responsibility. This is like what companies should be doing. And this relates to this paragraph 7 to 9 because that's literally like the protesters are like addressing these companies and how they should be responsible for this. Um, Another trick to this question is that you have to read. It doesn't tell you what is these paragraphs are saying. It tells you what is the role in the organization of the excerpt. So how does the author organize this excerpt? Well, let's look back at the passage. If we're looking at organization, it's not, oh, what is the meaning of each paragraph? It's how does the author talk about this issue? The author talks about the issue in terms of how people are willing to involve themselves in tech and they want to create the best new things. And then they say, but there's a problem to this. The problem to this is that there's a lot of discarded electronics. And then they talk about the new wave of 5G and how this is going to increase waste. After that, they talk about how states are dealing with these issues and actually the consequences that these rules cause. Paragraph 6 talks more specifically about how consumers deal with it and how they don't want to do anything. And then after that, it talks about a solution that these electronics could have for the not the consumers anymore. We talked about the consumers in paragraph 6. Here they're talking about the companies, how the companies are going to deal with this and how they can solve this. Um, so yeah, that's happening in 7, 8, and 9. So that's the organization. Organization is how the author organizes his arguments um, about the specific passage, how the author organizes what he puts in each paragraph. So it should just be D because it goes away from the discussion of what consumers do and it talks about how companies have responsibility for this. So it should just be D. Okay, let's go to the next one. Idea that e-waste regulations can be ineffective is conveyed in the excerpt through. So e-waste regulations can be ineffective. So how can e-waste regulations be ineffective? E-waste regulations is talked more specifically in here. Paragraph 6 talks about it. E-waste rules. Rules and regulations are the same thing. Okay. So when it says e-waste rules exist, um, it tells us that recycling can be a pain for consumers. People don't want to go in a bin outside their homes. People just take it to a store, which may pay them, but also charge them to get rid of it. Many consumers, paralyzed by the hassle, don't even want to throw out their phones. So how does it talk about the e-waste rules? It talks about it through what people are doing. So let's go back to question 16. And it should just be F, I think. An observation about the typical consumer behavior in response to e-waste regulations. This is good. They only talk about the consumer behavior. There are statistics in this passage, but that's not talking about e-waste regulations or e-waste rules. It tells us that rules are ineffective, and it shows us that they're ineffective because it talks about what people do in this situation, how they don't want to go through the hassle of this. So it should just be F. Okay. Let's go to the next one. How does the diagram after okay, so now it's the diagram one. Most support the claim made in paragraph 4. Okay, let's read paragraph 4 and then that. It says less than a quarter of waste is recycled. The rest is incinerated or ends up in landfills. That's bad news as e-waste can contain harmful materials. So it's saying that the fact that it ends up in landfills, this contributes to harmful materials that pose environmental risks. And this shows us the environmental risks. Shows us that okay, so this is a landfill. Landfill causes three things: air emissions, wastewater treatment plant, and groundwater. So landfill affects groundwater, um affects the fish. Landfill affects wastewater treatment plants that affect the surface water, also affect the fish. Landfill affects air emissions. Air emissions either directly go to the trees and affect these people and the animal, or they go to the rain. And as the rain comes down, all these bad chemicals are affecting the people and the animal. So paragraph 4 tells us more specifically that it's a landfill that's causing it. So um, how does the diagram after paragraph 9 most support the claim made in paragraph 4? Um, okay, that's true, but this is not like shown in the diagram. We don't see how people are sending large amounts. The diagram emphasizes that toxic chemicals can easily spread from landfills. This is good. We see the spread. We literally see the spread in paragraph 9. I mean, we see the spread in the diagram. The diagram shows us how these things are spreading from landfills. Most landfills are poorly designed. Again, this is not shown in the diagram. The diagram doesn't show any poor design. It literally just shows us a cause and effect of how the chemicals go from the landfills and affects people. And then D, diagram shows that water sources near landfills are endangered by e-waste. Um, this could be true, but again, this does not best support the claim made in paragraph 4. What best supports the claim is that toxic chemicals can easily spread from landfills. D is too specific, and D says, oh, it affects water sources. But this is not true. It does affect water sources, but we want to show that these chemicals spreads from landfills. That's the main idea. The main idea is not that we're affecting this one place, it's the fact that everything is being affected because of toxic chemicals. So that's why D is wrong, and the answer should just be B. Okay, does anyone have any questions on this passage? I'm gonna go to the poem one, and then I'm just gonna do whatever we feel like is best after that. Okay, let's go to the poem one. I'm gonna clear all drawings. Oh, someone said, how do you find the central idea quickly? There's no like quick way to find it. The best way to find the central idea, I mean, from this passage, it's very easy. The world has an e-waste problem. That's a central idea. E-waste is a problem. Electronic waste, so usually it's in the title, or as you skim through the passage, you just have to find the main argument. It's very obvious the main argument here is that electronic waste is bad for the environment and people aren't doing a good job of preventing it. So yeah, you just have to skim through. Um, okay, let's do the poem. I'm gonna read it quickly and then let's do it. I think it's here. Okay, so in the meantime, hopefully everyone has this. If you don't have it, I sent the link to this in the chat, so just like read through it right now before we start going over it. Okay? Okay, I finished reading it. I'll just give you guys like one more minute just to skim through and get the idea here before I just review this. And again, feel free to ask any questions as we like go through it. Someone said, "How do you find main idea fast? What are keywords?" Okay, I'll like go through it for this one. I guess poems don't really have a, nah, they have a theme. This one doesn't really have a strong theme, to be honest. But yeah, I'll go through that in a minute. So everyone just take like one more minute just to finish this, and then we'll review. Okay, let's start. Okay. How do you find main idea fast? What are keywords? I mean, the idea is like main idea is usually in like the first or last paragraph, usually emphasized. Bro, this one like there's not really a strong main idea. This seems like kind of like if I had to describe this poem, it's just like a reflection of someone's mind, just like talking about how like how our world exists scientifically. Um, there's not really a big main idea that I see here, but let's just walk through this poem and how I think about it. Um, tells us that there's a difference between things that we actually feel like objects, and there are things, even smaller things, that seem to exist only when we are looking right at them. They're probably talking about like molecules, um, more specifically like atoms. Maybe if you had like a microscope, you would be able to see it. Talks about and then it just like breaks it down. We have atoms, protons, electrons, neutrons, and then what's beneath that. And then here he kind of just like or they kind of just like ramble on about how everything has these atoms, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and there's still stuff in between that he hasn't addressed yet, but it's everywhere that you see. And then he continues this discussion about how everything and everywhere are made up of the same stuff. How do we find it? And then I guess like we can listen for it in the wavelengths from deep space, or we build tunnels beneath the surface and race particles, flashing along at close to the speed of light until everything we know bangs against everything else we know. So, is he talking about physically doing it? I'm not like too sure myself, but it seems like it's kind of like just a thought, like a pretty creative thought that he has. And then in the explosion, he talks about these chemicals. These are probably just chemicals that are smaller than protons, electrons, neutrons, or what make them up. I don't know specifically. I don't have like I can't even use outside science knowledge on this. It doesn't really matter. But it seems like these are just the things beneath them. Um, and then this is just his thought. They sound like dinosaurs or maybe bands playing terrible music. The one thing we know for sure is they spin. And then it seems like he has this idea that everything spins, and this is how gravity enters our world, how our world is held together and apart. What keeps together the pencil in your right hand right now as separate from Jupiter? Like why things are just here right now physically with us. Um, and then physicists jot down what they can, whatever seems most real, that they let us perceive their wild dancing, combusting to the music they make. Again, this is just like there's no main, I can't really come up with a main idea with this. Someone said, I think scientists actually use long tunnels to test particles. Okay, that could be an idea. Again, it doesn't really affect how I can answer these questions just because I understand that this is a detail that he just has just to describe how we can find things deeper into like atoms itself. So again, either if you had asked me what the main idea is, I probably wouldn't have like a solid one. But yeah, someone said, "Can you show us an example of context clues in this?" Well, let's go through the questions and I'll try my best. This lines help us develop a central idea of the poem. So maybe the idea of the poem is just like beneath everything that's surface level, there's always something that's deeper between. That's why he talks about atoms, he talks about um like these neutrons, protons, electrons. So yeah. And then someone said, are the poems normally Old English? No. I mean, this one's not really Old English, isn't? No, it isn't even. So it really depends. I think the poem I forgot what the name of my poem was on my SHSAT. I mean, it was like years ago, but I remember it was Old English for me, so it was kind of that's why I think it was kind of tough. This one's a bit easier just because it's like a normal person talking. Let's try 40. Central idea. Um, so it seems what's that notice? Okay. Okay, it seems like it says we find that protons, electrons, and neutrons, and beneath that, what exactly? So this is just an idea that he has. It's like he understands that everything is made up of atoms and protons, neutrons, electrons, and what is beneath that. So, and then he spends the entire poem talking about how we can find what is beneath that, and then specifically what is beneath that. So I think he's wrong because he's interested, but this is telling us he's interested in determining how they work together. He's not interested in how they work together. He's interested in what makes up actual matter, what makes up these objects. So E is wrong. F is more specific about this. F says curiosity. Curiosity, interest, same thing about what makes up matter. True. He wants to know what makes up matter. What is it made out of? Desire to prove that particles make up matter. He has no desire to prove this. He just wants to understand what is beneath this matter. And then H says questions about which tools are needed to study matter. He doesn't have any questions about what tools are. Here he is addressing specifically what is beneath protons, electrons, and neutrons. What makes up them? So it's quite literally just going to be F. This one should be kind of directly. Um, yeah, okay. Someone said, does that mean questions are normally a key idea in the questions given? So I mean, this one specifically tells us that they highlight a central idea, and how do they highlight the central idea? The speaker has to do something here. So this one specifically tells us what is the speaker thinking about.
Um, can you hear me? Okay, this is good. Okay, anyways, I was saying this is telling us what the speakers are thinking or what the speaker is doing in this specifically. Um, and here it's just like we see that he has some curiosity about what makes it matter. Someone brought up a good point. You can read the description at the top of the poem just to describe. I think the top of the poem tells us that um, this underground facility helps scientists and understand how the smallest particles of matter interact with one another. So this is the actual thing that's being talked about here. That's a really good point. So if you want to just look at that, you can. And then someone said, this poem is making me think about the particles that form particles that make matter. It is an endless cycle. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. It seems like there just continuously has to be something that makes up something. The reader just wants to, or the author just wants to explore this idea. And someone says, is that the same for online questions? Yes, online questions are the same as this like actual one that you're seeing. It's literally just an online format. That's the only difference. How do we figure out what the poem is about if there's no like heading? I mean, it says looking for the smallest spark of everything. That sentence itself tells me, okay, this author is a very curious person. They're looking for something. Smallest spark of everything, smallest part of like what makes up something. So it seems like there's just this endless cycle that the author is looking for here. So the title does give it a little bit away. And then I don't know, the best way to understand this, you really have to just read through the poem and do your best in understanding it. I can't really like explain like a good strategy. I can't explain something that'll work for all poems. You kind of just have to read through it and just understand. So yeah, let's finish this poem up, just because I want some time to go through some other passages too, and then you guys can feel free to ask as many questions. Someone said, "What is a sonnet?" Sonnet is just a type of poem. The break between the second stanza, the third stanza serves as a transition from. Okay, this is important. Second and third. Second paragraph tells us, oh, now this shows us that the author wants to be more specific about what makes up atoms, what makes up protons, neutrons, and electrons, and how they're everywhere. And then this tells us how do we find it. So these questions are literally guiding us as to what is the meaning of both paragraphs. Second paragraph is telling us what makes up these matter. Third paragraph is telling us how do we find it? What can we do to find what makes up this matter? Just find the answer that makes the most sense for those two questions. Again, A is pretty good. Identifying common physical objects. This is good. Protons, neutrons, electrons, and then all physical objects that have some sort of atom, and then explaining how the particles that make up all physical things are observed. How do we find them? That's literally what this means. How do we find them? How do we observe them? So B is wrong because the second part is wrong. Invisible materials make the world complicated. It does not say that. It does not say how it's complicated. C, discussing the methods used to study particles in space to describing how matter is researched on Earth. So the methods used to study particles in space, there's no methods. Like, this is not the first stanza. And then, second stanza, sorry. And then D says, describing an environment that feels comfortable to characterizing an environment that seems unstable. Is not what this serves as a transition from. You have to think about what the main idea of the passage is. So, yeah. Yeah, someone said a stanza for poem and paragraph for essay or book. Yes, that is correct. I'm sorry I said paragraph. I kind of just get used to saying both of the same things. Second stanza just means second paragraph. Like they're like, it's just in a poem you say stanza. But yeah, this one should be directly A. I think this one's very obvious. 42. The main purpose of the comparison of lines 23 to 24 of a poem, 23 to 24. Or we can build long, deep circular tunnels beneath the Earth's surface of this and Earth and erase particles like racing cars, only very tiny cars flashing along at close to the speed of light. So this is just giving us an example of how particles are racing. Particles are racing like racing cars, except they're very small and they're going super fast. That's literally what this means. So 42, how the size makes it difficult to see never says how it's difficult to see. This is just coming out of nowhere. Move within the tunnel. Yes, it tells us that they're racing cars. That's how they're moving in the tunnel. That's why they're compared to racing cars. Familiar shape does not describe the shape. It does not describe how it can only be seen in darkness. This one should be directly F. Okay. 43. The lines help develop a central idea by suggesting that. So it says, until everything we know bangs against everything else we know. Okay, this one's, let's go back to the specific, like, stanza of the poem, and then we'll figure this one out. So, okay, so it's here specifically, it says, we can build long, deep circular tunnels beneath the Earth's surface of this, or beneath the surface of this Earth, and erase particles like racing cars, only very tiny cars flashing along at close speed to the speed of light, until everything we know, everything we think we know, bangs against everything else we know. So I think this is relating to how everything we think we know is just like what scientists know about the current world right now. This bangs against everything else we know. So just everything else we know, maybe something that we discover about, like specifically, like how can we find like these? How can we just like continue? How can we find specifically what is beneath protons, electrons, neutrons? That's kind of the idea that I'm getting. So what is the central idea in the poem? Well, more specifically, we know that this paragraph that 26, 25, and 26 is talking about, this experiment that's being talked about here, deep circular tunnels beneath the surface of the Earth and erase particles, is talked about here. And it says it helps scientists study and understand how the smallest particles of matter interact with one another. And the LHC propels atomic particle beams along a 17-mile long ring. So this specifically is what bangs against everything else we know. Everything else we know is this. This is the thing that we just figured out, right? It seems like this experiment is trying to help us understand how the smallest particles of matter interact with one another. So let's go back. Creative methods for researching particles are frequently being invented. Although I agree that this is like creative method, this is not how we develop a central idea. It seems like more specifically they want us to understand that the central idea is that there's like more research and experiments that we do that just add to our knowledge. So we want to see that more specifically. This tells us that creative methods are being invented, but does not say the thing after that. The fact that these creative methods help us understand particles. So that's why A is wrong. B says ongoing research continues to add to our knowledge of particles. This is good. I mean, ongoing research, that's like what the experiment is, continues to add to our knowledge of particles. I like this more because the whole idea is like, how do we know what these particles are? How do we know that they exist? And how do we know what exists beneath them? So yeah, I mean, B is pretty good. C, our understanding of particles is limited to the equipment. It never talks about this, limited by the equipment. And then D never talks about competing theories. These two things are just not mentioned. So yeah. Okay, so the answer should just be B here. Okay, let's go to 44. The imagery in these lines reveal that the speaker. So 44 says, and there in the explosion in the darkness, briefly incandescent they appear. So imagery. What does imagery mean? Imagery talks about how it is emphasized, or how we can imagine this thing going on. So if I were to imagine this, I would imagine a big explosion in the darkness, briefly incandescent they appear. So just imagine it. It's like you're in the darkness and then there's a loud explosion and then you see these particles. I know it's going to talk about the particles. This is lines 27 to 28. After that, it tells us the particles that come out. So it seems kind of majestic the way that these particles come out. So there's no envying physicists. That's not a correct idea. Has personally observed cladding particles. Again, that's not what the imagery reveals. This could be a true thing, but this is not what the imagery is revealing about the speaker. So F is wrong. G says they admire the powerful reactions. Yes, imagery usually evokes an emotion. You can memorize that, I guess. It might be like a good idea to think about. Imagery always like evokes an emotion in like either to the readers or to like the actual author. In this case, imagery is evoking the emotion that it seems like the author is like so amazed that they were able to finally see like like the deeper particles that come about when they collide. Um, so I see this admiration because it's like if you imagine the scene where suddenly there's an explosion in the darkness and these particles appear, it's like wow, it's very majestic, and it seems like the author was really like wanted to see these. So G is a pretty good answer. And then H, simplistic understanding. That's not true. Again, imagery evokes an emotion. Imagery is not telling us that the author has like a basic understanding of how they collide. That would be a more literal like term, I guess. So yeah, the answer would just be G here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Terrible drawings. Okay, let's go to 45. Their names sound like dinosaurs or maybe bands playing terrible music in someone's garage. Wait, this is talked about in, yeah, the quarks, leptons, bosons, baryons, mesons. So he's describing the deeper particles that he found. The speaker refers to familiar objects and events in the lines most likely to. Okay, let's think about this. A, explain confusing information in simpler terms. It's not explaining anything. We don't get the explanation for this confusing information. We actually don't, right? This is no explanation. It's just telling us, he's just making a funny like comment about this. B, demonstrate how scientific ideas can be explained by describing situations that many people are familiar with. No, again, scientific ideas are not being explained here. And we don't get any explanation as to what these particles are. Emphasize that the process being used to research particles is still in the early stage of development. No, nothing tells us that it's in the early stage of development. Quite literally, D should be the answer. D tells us that the scientific language is silly by making a humorous comparison. This is good. This is a humorous comparison. He's looking at the names and then he's saying that, oh, they sound like dinosaurs or bands playing bad music in someone's garage. So this is pretty obvious that this is just like a humorous comparison. So the answer should just be D. Okay. Okay, let's go to 46. 36 to 39 from the poem, both together and apart, what keeps together the pencil in your hand right now, as well as separate from, say, Jupiter? Okay, so most likely. Where's most likely? Well, never mind. It says the poet includes these lines most likely to emphasize that. I think this is telling us that it's like the gravity forces that, or like the forces that he talks about that keeps together the pencil in my hand compared to like from Jupiter. Um, so the poet includes these lines to emphasize what? Let's see. Um, it is important for physicists to continue their research about particles. No, because like this is not really relevant to what's being said here. Um, there's no direct mention to like what physicists are doing. F says these particles have a powerful effect on everything. More specifically, I mean, it would be better if they emphasized how it's not just the particles, it's kind of like the gravity that keeps the particles together. So F could be a good answer. The powerful effect, this is a powerful effect. Quite literally, like the fact that your pencil is in your hand right now and not in Jupiter. That's a powerful effect. G, discoveries about particles provide a little information. It's not true. This is pretty big information. Like the fact that this guy like discovered how like I guess this there's like this gravity motion that like keeps items together. It's a pretty big thing. And then the study of objects or in the study of particles are similar. Not really. This is not a study of objects in space. This is the study of like particles. They're like literally the same thing. This is talking about how particles are being kept together. So the answer should just be F here. Yeah. Let's do the next two. I'll go a bit quicker just because I want to go through at least like one more passage. 47, the last stanza concludes the poem by emphasizing which central idea? Um, and okay, so we can rule out some answer choices. Unusual work of physicists, unconventional locations, that is not a central idea. This is just like weird. Why would they include this? Um, physicists are learning about the unpredictable behavior of particles that break up matter. We don't see anything that breaks up matter. That's not being talked about specific. This is specific, but again, we are not talking about breaking up matter. We are talking about how matter is being kept together and what makes up matter. Physicists enthusiastically share their discoveries, their research yields, because most people can relate to their findings. Okay, so this is just wrong. This is a wrong inference. Most people can relate to their findings. How? Like, how can people relate to findings that are just being made? This is a very scientific topic. People don't really understand this. Um, it's more specifically, the answer should just be A. The exciting work that physicists conduct provides information about fundamental aspects of the universe. What's a fundamental aspect that's being talked about in the last stanza? Literally the fact that your pencil is here, the forces that keep your pencil here and not subject, like not like send them to like Jupiter. That's literally like a pretty like that's just like more relevant. Someone said so questions have to be direct but not too wordy. Yeah, that's a good way to like think about this. Um, More specifically, I think A is just a better answer choice than C or D because A directly tells us fundamental aspects of the universe. So I know this is correct. C and D say C is just wrong. Particles that break up matter not talked about. D is I'd say it's a bit wordy. It says because most people can relate to their findings. That's not why they share the discoveries of their research yields. Or yeah, it does say because, so that could be another reason why. They're not sharing it because people can relate to their findings. They don't really care whether or not people can relate to it or not. They kind of just do the findings so that we learn about the universe. So yeah, the answer should just be A. And then let's do 48. So 48, the lines reveal the speakers. Okay. They spin it. It is only down there in the darkness in the vast garage where physicists jot down with a can whether it seems most real that they let us perceive the raw dancing, combusting the music they make. What do these lines reveal? So it seems like here it's like the actual physicist's layer as in like where they explore their studies and where they develop them. Physicists jot down and then they let us perceive their wild dancing, combusting to the music they make. So it kind of like it's not making fun of them, but it's like kind of just like making it it's like giving us like a creative space for them to just explore like their interest in these actual like studies. So there's no frustration mentioned. Frantically working, no, there's nothing that tells us that they want to do it right away. G is pretty good. Interest in physics and their study of particles. And so they're not working in secrecy. There's nothing that tells us this is secret. Although they are working only together, there's nothing that tells us about the secrecy idea. So the answer should just be G. Okay. Sorry it took a bit long. I just kind of wanted to explain as much as I could for each question. Does anyone have any questions on this passage? Again, if you have questions about old passages, we'll get to it. Okay. Why don't we do, does anyone have like a passage that they want to do? I'm sorry I can't go through every question. I want to go through as many questions as I can though. So, just want to get an idea like what passage do you guys want to do? Let's look through. Okay, so what's the last one? We'll do the last one, and then I'll stay behind just so that if anyone has any questions, I can also send an answer key. Again, I'm sorry I can't do like every passage, but I'll like try my best. Okay, let me read through this. Okay, I think I'm done. Again, I'm sorry for anyone who's just like wants to do a different passage. I think a lot of people asked for this passage, which is why I wanted to do this one. If we have time after, obviously we'll try to go over it. Let's start the passage. Paragraph one, the phrase is cool, morning breezes sweep freely and wafting the perfume of sweet grasses. Um, Okay, so these seems like cool morning breeze, wafting perfume. These are like pretty positive feelings. Mix of emotions is wrong. Sadness is also wrong. Don't really see anything that relates to that. Again, please don't edit the passages. I mean, please don't edit the screen as I work through. Thank you. Enthusiasm versus the fond feelings. So if we look more at the context, it'll give us the answer for this. So let's go back to paragraph 1. So this person is a Native American writer who published this to expose what life is like on a reservation. So when she's looking and when she's describing this moment, it's more of like a past memory than her enthusiasm for actually working. So these phrases that are being used here, they're not, although enthusiasm is a good idea, it's not enthusiasm for which she approached her work indoors. These phrases are used to remind people of her childhood and remind herself of her childhood experiences. So that's why C is the correct answer here. Okay. Does that make sense? Because this passage, she is talking about a moment in her childhood. When you read these like words, they kind of remind you of that. So it should just be C. 50, the phrase just an artist arranges the paint suggests that. Paragraph 2. Okay. My mother spread upon a mat her colored beads. So her colored beads, the way that they like work on these beads is just like an artist arranges the paints. So I get this. It's just a comparison between both. Um, so beadwork is a true form of art. This could be good. Colors are source of artistic inspiration. What does color have to do with here? That's not the main point. The fact is that her mom is doing beadwork. It doesn't really talk about the steps. It's just a comparison between how doing beadwork is like painting an art piece. The beadworker tries to imitate art. There's no imitation of art. It is exactly similar. It's very similar to it, but there's no imitation. Imitation means you're copying art. It's not that the fact that they're copying art. It's more that the fact that it is a form of art. And people who do beadwork, it's kind of like the same as like an artist that works on the paints. Okay, so it's E. 51. Sequence in paragraphs 1 and 2 contribute to the development of the idea in the excerpt by. Well, let's look at what the sequence is. So mom started doing it right after breakfast. And then she did all this, untying the long tasselled strings that bound a small brown buckskin bag. Then her mom worked on this. It's like skimming through. Yeah, and then it seems like she just like kind of directly just started working on this and working on these beats, and working on these small moccasins for a small daughter. So let's go back now. Listing the many steps that involved in the process of beating. It's not really to show any difficulty or complexity. Again, the author just wants to show how she approached this work in her childhood. That's like the main idea here. Like how her daily, or I don't know if it's a daily routine, but I guess like her routine as a kid, like she woke up and her mom directly wanted to start working on these like beats. So it's not A. Again, we're not talking about to work most efficiently. So B is wrong. Emphasizing the time required to fully prepare for and execute the many large and small tasks. Although that's true, it might take a while, but there's no emphasis of time that I can see in that passage. So we can rule out C. And then D says detailing each step in order to highlight the author's enthusiasm for the work. So this is a bit more specific. I do like the fact that they talked about author's enthusiasm because we're looking for the development of ideas. What is the development of ideas? So I guess like one of the main ideas that could be here in this passage is that the author is very enthusiastic to work on these beats. So the fact is that they are detailing all these steps just to show, and not just to show, just to highlight how enthusiastic the author is for the work. So the answer should just be D. Okay, does anyone have any questions on that? Let's go to 52. details in paragraph 3 convey a central idea of the excerpt by suggesting that. So, and please don't edit the screen while I work. Details of paragraph 3. So this is talking about how closely beside. Someone said, "How do you tell the different question types?" I guess like you just have to like read through and work on it. This is talking about how words affect tone, suggestion, so make an inference, contributes to development of ideas. So you go back to the paragraphs. I don't know. This is understanding the author's purpose question. This one is a detailed question. It's really just like looking at the wording of the questions. If you take a Kweller Prep class, we literally have a textbook that goes through the main topics of the reading and like associated question words or question like not like question words, but like example questions that relate to this topic. So that's like one way you can find it out. Okay. The details in paragraph 3 convey a central idea of the excerpt by suggesting that. So in paragraph 3, she talks more specifically how, although she was a kid, she was watching her mom on a rug. She would observe her mom, and it just describes this. It describes this how her mom would. It describes us how her mom would create this, or how her mom would work on this materials, and it's just like detailed here. But it seems like here she's just like mainly talking about how she observed her mom as she did this. So the author was interested in the work. This could be a good idea. Well, one thing is she knew her mom was making something for her. That's said about in the last paragraph. The author was interested in her work. So since this was said in the last paragraph, it's not really relevant to the details in paragraph 3, so we can rule this out. The author had difficulty learning through observation. Never mentions that she had difficulty learning through observation. I think she was just a kid. She was just observing her mom. The author was determined to behave again. There's no idea of like her behaving in that paragraph. It never talks about anything of how she is behaving or her mom forced her to behave. So we're gonna rule this out. And then H, the author had great admiration for her mom's precision and mastery of her craft. I mean, we see the admiration more specifically in like the first two sentences, and then the fact that she's detailing what her mom does, shows her admiration. Closely behind her mother, I sat on a rug with a scrap of buckskin in one hand and all in another. This tells us that she's very interested in what her mom is doing. If she wasn't interested, then she wouldn't stand so close. She wouldn't sit so closely next to her mom and actually watch her work on it and do it herself, right? So yeah, the answer should just be H. Okay, let's go to 53. Which sentence best summarizes the process of beating that's described in the excerpt? Okay, from a skein. What is skein? From yarn. Mom pulled out a single one. She pierced the buckskin. She pierced the buckskin on the yarn, skillfully threaded it with the white sinew. Picking up the tiny beads one by one, she strung them with the point of her thread, always twisting it carefully after every stitch. So this is where it's described. Going back to the question 53. Okay, never talks about spreading them out on a mat with different colors, like a paint palette. This was just they interpreted the art piece thing wrong. Cut the double sheet of buckskin into shape. Doesn't you don't even I don't think you start with that. So this is wrong. And then arrange the beads into groups of colors. Smooth out a double sheet of buckskin. Take a thread of sinew, pierce the buckskin with the awl, and then string it with the beads. This seems correct. Let me just look at the other one. Gather beads, buckskin, sinew, and awl and place them on a mat. Cut the buckskin into the desired shape. Decide on a pattern for the beads and create it with the sinews and the awl. Thread the beads into sinew in the desired pattern and twist it tight. So I think this is very close. There's some details that are off, like twisting it tight and gathering everything on a mat at the start. I think the first thing that the author does is only focus on arranging the beats onto the mat and then working with the other materials. So I think the answer should just be C. Okay. 54, the idea that mastering moccasin design and creation requires experience is best illustrated in the excerpt to mastering moccasin design and creation requires experience. So let's look at the passage for this. Well, I mean, like, we can tell that it requires experience. It took many trials before I learned how to knot my sinew thread on the point of my finger. And then here she kind of just talks about the difficulty with each process as she starts learning this. Um, and 5 says, after some experience, I usually drew easy and simple crosses into squares. There were some of the sets of forms. These were some of the sets of forms. And then it tells us, like, as she grew with experience, she was able to understand how to create this. So let's go back. Um, How does this design? The information about the advanced technique of incorporating porcupine's quills into design. So this is something that she does. We can keep this for now. I'm not sure how strong this is. Ask the descriptions of the special materials that must be used to make decorated moccasins. I don't think the special materials really tell us anything. We want to show that this design requires experience, and experience is not through special materials. I would also disagree with G. Various color combinations. That's not really showing us experience. The example of the author successfully and independently using sharpened rod. Okay, I like this. I think we can keep one of these. So either it was the advanced technique of making the quills or the author actually working on the sharpened rod. So let's go back in the passage. So more specifically in okay, it seems like more specifically. So in 6, it's telling us when she became familiar with the designing, a harder lesson was given me. So she was assigned something that was harder to do. She was working on tinted porcupine quills. And then she worked through this. These sharp points were poisonous and worked into the flesh wherever they lodged. For this reason, my mother said I should not do much alone in quills until I was tall as my cousin worked as it went. So here, it shows us that you need experience in order to work with these, like, in order to work with like higher end materials. So yeah, yeah. Someone said it includes design and creation, so I would assume it's E. Yeah, I think it should just be E then. Okay, let's do 55. How does the author distinguish her point of view from her mother? Um, okay, let's look through each one. Well, we want to see how she distinguishes her point from that of her mother, so they both have different ideas on how to do things. Let's look. We'll look at the first two. So techniques for knotting sinew thread, and then approaches to beadwork design. Well, the first one, when she mentions the knotting sinew thread, that's kind of just like a learning moment for her. I don't really see like any big difference um in like what her mom does. She kind of like mimics what her mom wants to do. Um 5 is more specific on how their designs are different. She says, my original designs were not as always symmetrical nor sufficiently characteristic, two faults with which my mother had a little patience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that kind of like shows the difference between their points of view on like working with the materials. So I would just choose B. Um, I don't know. I just see like the difference in the point of view pretty obviously here, so it should just be B. Okay. Let's try to go through the other two and then we'll finish. Um, read the sentence from paragraph 7. Which sentence best describes how the sentence fits into the overall structure of the excerpt? After always after these confining lessons, I was wild with surplus spirits. found that joyous relief in running loose in the open again. So how does this fit? Well, what's happening here? We see specifically confining lessons. Sometimes she would find like it would just be very boring. It's like how we maybe like how we approach like going to school. It's a lot of hard work, but at the end of the day, you just like enjoy time with your friends. So first, after these confining lessons, she was wild with surplus spirits, find joyous relief in running loose. So it shows us the difference between someone who's like been working all day on this thing or like doing lessons on this thing compared to the spirits, like the wild spirits that they experience after. So it's not really demanding relationship. I disagree with this statement. Um, she doesn't. She actually like wants to see her mom work, and she doesn't have a problem watching her mom work. So E's wrong. Signals a change from the challenging aspects of life of the reservation. Okay, so this is not relevant. It's not talking about the life on the reservation. G says highlights a contrast between focus and control required while working, freedom and having fun outside. This is pretty good. This is exactly what this part is talking about here. And then H, describe a sequence of events. I think this is good, but more specifically, it's not just a sequence of events. It's just showing how there's such a difference between the author like focusing on her work and then actually having the freedom when she finishes it. So the answer should just be G. Yeah. Okay, let's go to 57. The table after paragraph 7 expands upon a central idea in the passage in the excerpt because it shows that the table in paragraph 7. Oh, I forgot there is a table. Someone said if you're stuck between two answers, do you just pick the most specific one? I would pick the one that's most supported in the passage. So whether that's more specific, whether that's exactly said in the passage, you would just want to pick that one. Okay. It gives us like a sequence. So Dakota used beads from bones, shells, stones, and animal teeth. And then they began trading with the French, and then they began working with the glass beads. Um, so this progression is pretty interesting. I guess it's kind of important. It shows like how they evolved, I guess. They used to work on things that were native here, bones, shells, stones, and animal teeth, and then they evolved to like glass beads and clothing, artwork, and decorations. So let's see. The craft that the author was learning was a tradition that endured through many generations and changes. So although the beads are actually changing, this is something that the fact that they're using beads, um, and European traders bring glass beads to North America, the fact that they're still working to create these items, right? The fact that they're doing this for many generations is shown in this table. So even though they're using different material, they're still doing the same general like thing. They're creating. So the answer should just be A. The craft was a tradition. The fact that they were creating things, it was a tradition that endured through many generations and changes. There were many changes to it, right? They worked with different material, but we see that this tradition has stayed. So that's why it's A. Resisting influence, I mean, they didn't resist the influence. When European traders brought those materials, they started using those. Um, recognized in Europe, we don't see any recognition in Europe with it. And then D, um, incorporate color into craftwork as a result of trade. I don't think we really see this logical progression in the passage. So the answer should just be A. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry this dragged on a bit long. I kind of wanted to just explain all these questions to like the best of my ability. Hopefully, like the poem passage was really helpful. Going through the other 2, 3 passages were helpful as well. I'm going to send the answer key to this in the chat right now, just so that you guys have like additional resources. But does anyone have any questions for me? I'll stay on for like a few minutes. And then tomorrow we're just going to do math. We're just going to go through as many math questions as we can. So yeah. So let me just pull it up. Okay, so I'm gonna send the answer key in the chat. I know a lot of you still had a lot of questions, but I'll put it here. So it said I'm still confused about number 53. 53. Yeah, this one's you just want to like look for details that are wrong. I already eliminated the first two because this is not, it says the process of beating. So it has to go one by one. This is not the first thing you do. This is also not the first thing you do. I think C and D are both like arguably very similar. The difference is D is saying to twist it tight, and there's still like a lot of small like things that are wrong with D. D says you have to gather all of them and place it on a map, but this is not true. If we go back to the passage where they talk about this, which is right here. She laid out the beads. That's the first thing the mom does when she starts with this. So she's only laying out the beads. And we want to do this in order. So the order here is just like working one by one. So she first arranges the beads into groups of colors on a mat. She lays them out and then arranges them. None of the other answer choices start with this thing. That's why they're wrong. So that's why the answer is just C. Yeah. Does anyone have any just general questions about the test? Any like thoughts they have? If not, like you can feel free to leave. Um, yeah. Someone said if you're stuck between two answers, which one of them, which one do I pick, even though both answers are supported by evidence from the text and different point of view? Again, I can't really help you with that because again, that's like something that it's very like it's hard to like describe what to do because again, what piece of information can I give you? I think you just have to look for what is best supported in the passage. I know the idea of that is like seems pretty difficult, but if you can find what is best supported by the passage and what makes the most logical sense to you, so you choose that answer. There's nothing else that you can do in that situation. Someone said to go over 33. Let me look at it real quick. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. How did the author's use of comparison contribute to the development of ideas in the excerpt? 4 and 5. Okay, so 4 tells us young children, almost all of us picked it up easily, but by adults, the brain loses some of its innate language capability, and we can't learn a second language after childhood, or it's harder. So I think what is that? What does it say about the comparison? Comparison contributes to the development of ideas. It doesn't. Okay, it does do A, but that's not why they're comparing them both. They're just comparing them both to show how kids can learn things better than adults, or adults. It's harder for adults to learn than children. Um, B is wrong. What is known more about language learning in children than about? No, this is not the emphasis. Why more is known about two topics. That's not why they're comparing them both. They're comparing them both um, to show the difference between adults and children. D says it explains why adults were the subject of the study rather than children. The overall subject of the experiment, is that they focused on the adult brain, said in paragraph 3. So here they show the difference between kids and adult brain, and they showed that adult's brain is harder for us to learn. So that's why the answer should just be D. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard to just do the passage question since like I would have to like read through and analyze it, but that's the idea. Um, yeah. Um, Someone said, what are some key things I should look for when revising a piece of information? Um, I'm assuming you mean like reviewing a piece of information in the passage. What's the key things to look for? How it relates to the main idea. Specifically, like a question will ask you to focus on an idea of something. So if you're looking for like a piece of information, focus on that main idea, whether it's like why the author included this piece of information, what's the main idea, like um, why the author is comparing two pieces of information, why the author is arguing about this, right? Just focusing on that idea when you go back in the passage. I think that's what you meant. Hopefully, that was a good explanation. Someone said, "What should I do the day before testing? Does active recall work?" I mean, not really. Um, The best strategy to do before the day of testing, I wouldn't study anything. I would definitely like have a good night rest, wake up early in the morning, like eat breakfast and get ready mentally. I think that's like the best thing you could do in this situation. Yeah, like I wouldn't study for the last day because it's not really going to help you. If you want to do like a small practice set, you can, but I wouldn't study. That's my suggestion. So yeah. Good. We'll end here. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 5 to 7. And yeah, take care. Have a nice rest of your day. We'll do math next tomorrow.